Hello, welcome to this World War II story about First Lieutenant Frank B. Clemons, B17 Pilot, and his crew. I'm proud to say that Frank Clemons was my uncle, and I'm very proud of his service and his contribution to the country. He did manage to save 4 of his crew. He was also one of the 1 million men that enlisted right after Pearl Harbor, and of course he's one of the 407,000 that didn't get home. Who is Frank Clemons? Well, he's a farm boy. He grew up in Pleasant Valley, Iowa. If you're familiar with the state of Iowa, there's a portion where it bumps out on the eastern side. Pleasant Valley is located right there along the river. It was a farming community, at least it was back at that time. My mother was his older sister by 2 years. He also had a younger sister, Charlotte, a younger brother, Marvin, and the youngest brother was Ben, all of which have passed on now. This plane went down in the North Sea, and his body was discovered 2 weeks later without a mark on him at the town of Cuxhaven. And the only identification he had on him at the time was a Bible that my grandmother had sent him. And the Bible, of course, was meant to protect him. In a way it did. It kept his name off the wall of the missing. But he was identified and buried in Cuxhaven. So a couple letters here that I kind of like to share with you. This first one comes from, it's again on military stationery. It's the Officers Club in Boise, Idaho. I'm not going to read it all, but down here at the bottom, hey, did you hear about us getting our tails shot off in training with the 50 caliber? Just had an investigation this morning, but they didn't do anything to the gunner that shot the tail off. They just told him, look where you're shooting next time. That cost the Uncle Sam $30,000 to fix his plane. Here's another one. The date of this one is January 3rd, 1943. If you hear a hell of a noise over your house someday, don't be scared. It's just me and my crew giving your house a buzz. He flew his plane down State Street 200 feet off the ground twice before he took his plane to England. 16 millimeter can of film. If you look on it, all it says is Frank's Film. My father never showed this to us kids growing up. Now the clock becomes 2018, and I got to read for the first time. It's called The Quality of Mercy, and you can buy this on Amazon for $18, and I hope you do. It would certainly help the family members of Lewis Means. Lewis Means was a navigator. He's the man that lost his leg when that ammo box blew up and it shredded his right leg. So he lost his leg just above his right leg just above his knee. But it's a very good read. I'm not going to tell you everything's in the book, but I am going to do the following. So what I decided to do is to take you, the viewer, on a 3-mission journey. I'm going to use this book, The First Over Germany, and Google Earth. And I'm going to take you virtually to all those places that my uncle bombed. They're still there today. And while a lot of this information is going to line up with the historical account, not all of it. And this book will call that into question. So I think you'll find this interesting. So let the fun begin. Thank you. Okay, so the date is May 1st, 1943. We're going to be talking about all these different places here. As you see, Guernsey, this airstrip, Brest Harbor. But the main force were 78 planes were launched to Saint Nazaire Pins in Saint Nazaire, France. Of the 78 planes, only 29 flew over the target. Others had to return because of mechanical issues, and that was not uncommon. Not usually, but in every raid the 8th Air Force did, they would have a diversionary group. These would be planes that did not have any bombs at all. So when they approached the target, those diversionary planes would split away with the idea of drawing the fighters away from the primary planes that are going to drop on the target. And that was a very successful method. They used it many times. Let's take a look at the target for today. So we're dropping down in altitude. This is the submarine pin in Saint Nazaire. That rooftop is about 15 feet thick of reinforced concrete. There's roughly 20 pins there. I counted them, but I'm not quite sure. Something like that. But Google Earth provides us a way to take a look at the street view. So let's swing around here to where we can get a better view. And there they are. This is how the pins looked 79 years ago. This is how they'll look 79 years in the future. Mission. Okay. So this was the first mission for the Battling Bee, and it was pretty much a disaster for him. For example, on the way to the target, Louis Means sees some planes up ahead, and he thinks that they're enemy planes coming at him, and he fires off a few shots. And of course, Uncle Frank jumps on the intercom and says, "Pilot to Navigator, what in the hell are you shooting at? Those are our planes up there. Knock it off." Then the other mistake made was Orrin Hiley didn't toggle his bombs. Okay, got to explain. In the book it says, "Serves him right for making a toggler out of me." I had to read that a couple of times and do some research to understand what he meant. 1943, they were short of trained bombardiers. And so what they created was togglers. A toggler was basically an enlisted man who could sit in that bomb bay section with his hand on the button, and he would watch the lead plane, and when the lead plane dropped his bombs, that was his signal to drop his. So you could put anybody in the plane. And of course, Orrin Hiley was upset about that because he wanted to do his job. But anyway, those bombs on Uncle Frank's plane were dropped in the sea. And of course, Uncle Frank, at this point, makes an announcement to the whole crew. He says, "Hey, when this plane gets back to base, they're going to paint it solid green for greenhorns." But what happens next is where it really gets interesting. They're now making their way back to base. They had very light resistance over Saint Nazaire. In the process of heading back to base, Louis Means notices some forts and B-24 Liberators below him. And he notices they go into a fog bank, and when they come out, they're gone. Didn't know where they went. And he also starts looking at the maps, and he notices that we're not matching up to where they were headed. Okay, and he makes an announcement to the pilot. He said, "Navigator to pilot, I don't know where these guys are taking us, but it's not matching up to the maps." Pilot to Navigator, "Do you see that plane up there? Inside that plane, there's a colonel, and the navigator's a major. My suggestion is to sit back and take a lesson. You've had enough goofs for today." As the planes got further along the way, and they're now dropping in altitude, Louis Means once again challenges the direction that they're going. And at this time, Uncle Frank basically says to the navigator, "Pilot to Navigator, I am not going to break radio silence for your hunch." So Uncle Frank was following orders, and now we're moving into Brest, France, and of course the men think they're heading into England. So The planes are now at about 1,000 feet, and they're making a final approach to this airport that you see right here, according to Louis Means' book. Louis Means looks down, and he can see a large battleship. It's anchored out here in the harbor. That could either be the Tirpitz or the Scharnhorst. But still, at this time, these men think they're approaching England. And they're following the lead plane as they're instructed to do so. Louis Means also notices that the whole harbor area looks like San Francisco Bay. And I could see where he could come up with that conclusion. The forts to the left and the right of him, he mentions in the book that they're starting to close the doors in preparation for landing. Also, whenever planes land, they would always shoot up a green flare, which basically means friendly planes are approaching. And if they shot up a red flare, that means there's an injured person on the plane. So that's what happened at this point. So up goes the green flare, and at that point, flashes of light start occurring all around this bay area. Now, that's usually what you're going to happen. If you're in a plane, you're going to see the flash of light, and then a second later, you'll hear those bullets ripping through the fuselage. And that's exactly what happened. The first officer, Clark, yells out, "The damn limeys are shooting at us. Let's get the hell out of here." They still think they're approaching England. At this point, the planes do a quick bank, and again, Uncle Frank stays very close, but immediately 2 forts drop out of the air. One crashes into the bay. Another one tries to make a landing along the shoreline. Then a 109 flashes by the plane, and Condon takes a shot at it and hits it. And at this point, somebody yells out, "Snafu, this is not England." So now every fort is basically trying to survive, because every gun on the ground is pointed at them, and the chances of getting out of there are very slim. In the case of Uncle Frank, now his plane is about 50 feet over the water, and they're approaching a barge, and on that barge there's a flak gun. That flak gun is an 88. Now, an 88's a great tool for against a B17 that's 20,000 feet in the air, but it's a useless chunk of steel when he's 50 feet off the ground. So Uncle Frank yells out, "Let him have it." And all forward guns on that plane riddle that barge with 50 caliber shells. And now they've cleared the barge, and they're heading towards England. Also, they start to climb back to altitude, and Louis Means notices a plane to his left that's the whole back half of it's on fire. But yet it's still under control, flight control. Inside that plane, there's a guy by the name of Snuffy Smith, and we're going to talk about him a little bit later. So the planes do a crash landing here at this airfield in England. The Snuffy Smith plane breaks in half. In the case of Uncle Frank's plane, it was untouched. They made a perfect landing, had no problem. All in total, 7 planes were lost in this particular attack. 18 other planes were damaged, some had to just be junked. One of the men that landed, that was taken off on a stretcher, Louis Means noticed he didn't look old enough to shave. He dies during the night. War is hell. This is Guernsey Island. Now you'd have to jump way into the book. This is after Louis Means has had his leg removed and he's been in the hospital for several weeks. They then finally place him in Stalag 3. And on the bulletin board, he gets to see the names of the men that were in that B-24 that went into the fog bank and disappeared. So these men also tried to land at Guernsey Island. So just exactly what's going on here. How can two squadrons make exactly the same mistake? In the Russell Strong book, they basically say a navigational error that was never fully explained. The military said it was defective compass. Before we leave Guernsey, I want to make one comment. Guernsey was heavily defended by the Germans. Eisenhower made the correct decision to just leave it alone. It did not get liberated until the end of the war. So, back to our mission. Exactly what happened on May 1st, 1943. Well, if you were to ask Colonel Putman was the man that was flying the lead plane. He basically said these words: "We were met with light resistance over Saint Nazaire submarine pens, but the Germans were very determined over Brest, France." He mentions nothing about trying to land there. What do I think happened? The 367th were flying to a false radio beacon. At Brest, they were broadcasting the same signal as this airfield over here. So the planes were flying to this location thinking they're flying to England. 8th Air Force never fell for this trick again. Well, now we're back to Thurleigh Field. What planes are left that can still fly? They lost quite a few that day. So here we are. We're going over to Antwerp now. This is the exact GPS locations where the Ford and the GM facilities were located. This is what 4 minutes over the target looks like in 1943, May 4th. Utter destruction. So they still build cars there today. After the war, the Marshall Plan put $1 million into that facility. You know, I kind of think that if we had a Marshall Plan after World War I, we might not have had a World War II. The 8th Air Force not only knew there's a GM facility there, they knew what they were making. Ford and GM plants were making military trucks, and they were making componentry for the V-2 rocket. So every mission of the 8th Air Force planned and conducted was done to the finest detail. If the primary target was obscured by clouds, there was a secondary target. This is Captain Clark Gable, top turret gunner. He's about 42 in this picture. He could have easily stayed home and made fictional movies in Hollywood. Not Clark. While he was in the service over here, he made a documentary on what life is like as an airman. And in the middle there is Captain Calhoun. The date, 15th of May, 1943. On the 15th of May, 43, this is my uncle's position. This is what's called the low squadron. They're at 23,500 feet. And if you look at all these other ones, they're at much higher. This is what's known as the Purple Heart position. So this is my uncle's plane. He's on the outside edge, which makes it even worse. The Memphis Belle is leading this mission. This is their 23rd mission. They will complete their 25th mission on the 17th of May, 43. Now, as the plane comes down, it crash lands in this area, and Uncle Frank's body lands into the sea, and he's carried out by the tide. 2 weeks later, his body is deposited right here on the shore of Cuxhaven. At this time, Louis Means in the Naval Hospital. And in walks the doctor. He's carrying a book, and he wants to know if Louis Means recognizes this book. Let's take a look at that. He pulled a small book from his tunic pocket. "Do you recognize this?" he said, handing it to me. "It's a New Testament, wrinkled and water-soaked. I had only to turn the back over and look at the iron back, and the faint name of Frank Clemons was written on the leaflet. So that's the Bible. My uncle did not have any other identification on him other than that Bible. So that Bible keeps my uncle's name off the wall of the missing. Now all the men now are in Stalag 3. Okay. Have you ever heard of the Great Escape? That happened at Stalag 3. You're looking at the men of the Great Escape.